Today we're doing DesignBais Security, and it's actually it's a fairly simple process, DesignBais Security, and I'll start right at the beginning with entity definition. DesignBais uses an entity model for its security, which basically means that you assign a characteristic to the database, if you like. So, and that characteristic, where it appears in all of the files in the database, it doesn't necessarily have to appear in all the files in the database, but the ones that have some sort of formal or even informal connection to that particular characteristic or entity. In my demonstration database, I have an entity that I've called Account Manager, and the Account Manager lives in the executive file. So in the executive file, and I'll just pull another window in here. So in my system list DB exec, there are essentially the keys to the executive file, and I'll just add a description. So they're the various people, in this case, that make up the account manager entity. These are the individual members of an entity. Now we talk about members, but they're essentially the records in the parent file. So you can see that the parent file is DB exec for my account manager, and up here I've detailed that the parent file name is DB exec. The dictionary or the field in that file that describes the actual field or the actual code is DBE exec code, and the field that is the description field is the executive name. Now the reason we do this is that this gives us the ability then when we define the entity security just to be able to display the name of the account manager in this case, and just make it a little bit clearer to the end user. The security model is meant for two audiences, one being the developer, and the second being the end user administrator, for the want of a better term. So when the end user administrator is using the entity security programs, you want to give them the descriptions as opposed to the codes that make up in this case the account manager entity. And then there's also a default lookup for this particular file. So when I'm talking about the entity account manager, I know what the codes are, what the descriptions are, and what the default search that the end users will see with regards to the account manager entity. But account manager is also found in various files, and the reason that we've gone to an entity name as opposed to a dictionary name is because it can be known as different things in different files. So in the executive file, the parent file, it's known as DBE executive code. In the client file, it's known as DBC account manager. In the transaction file, it's known as dbtr.account manager. So all of these dictionaries combined form the entity account manager. So once we've defined this and we're happy with that we've got all of the files that can be related to account manager, as you can see here that the transaction file doesn't have the account manager as a field in the file. It is actually a dictionary. It's a F-correlative or an I-type or something that derives the account manager probably from the client. So that's our entity definition. Then we've got entity security. Now this is the screen that, as I was saying, is designed for an end user administrator and also the development staff. So if we look at our entities that we've got set up, You can see here that I've got the entity named account manager. I've also got a few others. We'll start off at the account manager entity. And there's two sections of this screen. The top section defines what to do when anybody tries to access a file that has this entity relationship built into it. So in our case, it's going to be the executive file, the client file, and the transaction file. What to do if the entity member has not been set up. So down here on the right-hand side, you can see that we've got A through J set up as entity definitions. So for each member in the executive file, for instance, we have some sort of specific definition set up. But if I've got, say, a JKLMNO executive that doesn't have a security definition set up, then this section will be enacted for those particular members. So access for members not defined for all users, I can say, yeah, sure, give everybody access to those. Or alternatively, I can say, don't give anybody access to those. So if you've got a very strict security model and people are setting up new codes and they're assigning new clients to those codes, you may want to have a situation where people don't get to see those values from the start. So you can set this up to say access to all members that are not defined, individually defined, don't let anybody have access to those. Or I can say give everybody display and update access to those, or just display only. So this is essentially read and write, or read access, or no access. I could set up access denied except for a specific group of users or individual users. So that way, if you've got a situation where somebody is doing the maintenance, you don't want to have those people restricted from being able to access clients or products that have those particular characteristics, that entity characteristic. So you could set up individual groups of users or users to have access to that. I'm just going to leave that as display and update and leave that as open at the moment. And then we start looking at the individual member codes. So let's just have a look at this code B. At the moment, there's member code B, Andrew Morris is, and now that's the actual executive. So if we come here and look at our original listing, there's the executive file, and it's executive B, and that's Andrew Morris. And that is the member, those lists, those individual records in the executive file become the members of this account manager entity. So then we're having a look at, for Andrew Morris, at the moment, everybody, all users is display and update, except for those people that are in developer group, their access is denied. So I'm just going to delete that for the moment. I want to open that up. So I'll just save that now. If you have a look at that record for Andrew Morris again, just by clicking over here in the member list, you can see that it's display and update and everything's open. So we're going to the client form, this particular form that I've got set up for this particular demo. If I look at a standard search, you can see that I've added account manager into this search just to demonstrate how the account manager is being turned on and off by the security model. And as I next through these, I get to about page 4, and the A's turn to B's, and then eventually the B's turn to C's, and so on. So that means I can select any one of these particular clients from the list. So I'll pick this one, and that gets returned back. Fine. So if I come up here and key that client code in directly, that's also returned. I have a search clients here, so if I key in BRA, you can see there that Brattleboro Pools is there, and Bradford Same Day Couriers is there. I can click that, and that's returned up there as well. Now then I have a programmed based read. So at the moment, in this particular form, the properties from this are this client code field. I'm just doing a straight design-based read with an optimistic lock. And this field down here, this field down here is just a work field, and I'm calling this program db.i.webinar2701. I've put this program on the website as well, so if you wanted to have a look at the code behind this, that's there. That's on the website in the samples page. So let's have a look at this program, and we'll have a look at that particular validation section. So down here, DBC key part 3. This is where I'm doing the read manually. I'll rephrase that. That's where my program's doing the read as opposed to DesignBais is doing the read. So here you can see I've opened the file. I'm reading the record. I'm setting this ID to check equal DB value because that was the value that was entered by the end user. And then I'm calling dbi.g.security record. Now that happens behind the scenes when a standard DesignBais read occurs. This program gets called and it passes the various values through. So in this case, DB client gets passed because I'm reading the client file. I'm passing the client record, so I've read the client record. The reason that we ask you to specify to actually supply that record is that you actually may want to do some extra work before passing that record through to the security model, just in case there's some fields that you need to derive before you pass that through. Again, I assign DB value to a different variable because some of your routines they pass DB value, some of the security routines pass DB value, and that might get modified. So I just, as a habit, move that to a different variable. And then there's an error flag. And essentially, error flag has 3 values. If it's 0, you've got access to the record completely. If it's a 1, you don't have access to the record. And if it's a 2, you should have access to the record in inquiry mode. So it's up to you then to programmatically change the environment to suit whatever comes back. So simply setting IER.text would not allow somebody to have access to that record. In this case, where I've got DBDS, this record should be in inquiry only. You probably set the variable DB inquiry mode to 1, set the process stack to refresh the particular screen they're on, so everything gets set up to inquiry mode. So this is what you do if you're going to use DesignBais Security and want to plug it into your existing read routines. So it's not a huge amount of work to get the entity security to work for your existing product or for your existing business logic if you're not using DesignBais reads. Okay, so let's put this in action now. So we'll go back to this particular code, and I'll select the user group developers, which my user is a part of. So you can see this is a multi-select, so I can select various groups from there, or likewise various users, but I just want the development group. And in this case, I'm going to set access denied and submit that. So if we go back to this form now and run this form, select client as the search, and page through these again. We see the A's, and then we go from A to C. So the account manager B has been extracted from that selection process. Even though this selection process may be a program that you have run to do your individual selects, DesignBais will grab that selection results, which is why in our selections we return back to a variable DB return select. That way we can then process from that variable. If we were just returning to list numbers and stuff like that, that whole process gets harder to deal with. So DesignBais Search has automatically removed that particular executive from that list. If I come into this particular field and say, well, okay, I don't need to search it, I know the ID that I'm looking for, and hit Tab, you can see I don't have access to the record due to security settings based on account manager. We don't give any more information than we don't tell them why they don't have access to it. We just tell them that it is something to do with account manager. That way they can take it up, the end user can take it up to the end user administrator if they need more detail on that. So we come down to the search clients and we key in BRA. Now that remember in the previous time we did this, we had 2 results returned. This time in the predictive index results, we only have the one, which is not part of that, doesn't belong to that sales, that account manager B. So also the searches and the predictive searches also return the results that have been through the security model. Then if I come down to here and key in the same code and hit Tab, it says you do not have access to this record. Now that is the code, that is this code that is running that particular that is producing that particular error message. So if you're not using DesignBais reads, as is this case, that particular lump of code is looking after that security process. Now I've also got another one down at the bottom of this particular screen, which is a checklist. So you might have a situation where you're automatically producing lists of account managers, if you like, in this case. So my list here that has come from somewhere else that I want to process is A, B, C, D, which are account managers. So if I hit the check button now, what that's returned me is a list A, C, and D, because the security model says you don't have access to the account manager B. So if you've got drop-down lists that you're providing in your application that you also want to be affected in the security model, there are 2 ways to do that. One way is this: if you're providing the lists via, say, a virtual field, a work field that controls a drop-down list, you supply DesignBais Security list routine, and I'll just show you how that's called. So that's in the button section of this program. I've got a list bar in, which is effectively dbwork dbc.keypart4, which was that field, that multi-value field. I'm setting a list var delimiter of value mark. So then I'm saying call dbi.g.security list. I am passing keys from the executive file. The list var in is that the work variable. The list var out is what I get in return, and the list var delimiter is value mark. So that way, if your lists are already set up with attribute mark delimiters or sub-value delimiters or comma delimiters or whatever, that will extract the details from the list and then return you a list that has passed the security model. So that's a nice way if you're getting people to select account managers and stuff like that in a client screen. It's a nice way to be able to reduce the items that are in that list if you're building that list manually. If you're building the list automatically in the file properties db exec file, you can see here that the selection, this one here, select DB exec by executive name, and this is affected by security. So if I don't have access to the account manager B, which I don't in this instance, any drop-down list that uses for the executive file that is displayed on a form will automatically exclude that particular account manager B. So there's two ways that you can control lists that are being driven by the security model. Okay, if I set this to go back and set this account manager now to display only, if I do that, the submit button and delete buttons that are on forms that DesignBais looks at are automatically disabled. Well, it actually doesn't disable them. When you press the button, it says, sorry, you can't update this record. When you read the record, initially it'll tell you that you can't write the record because of the security settings. So at least gives people a warning that their security model is restricting them from updating the record when they first go into it, in case they do a whole lot of work and then hit the submit button, and then it tells them it's better to tell them at the front. And what would happen then in the program where we're validating this, you would get this, you would get the error flag too, and then that allows you, if you're doing this programmatically, to set that record up as an inquiry only field. The best thing to do in that situation would be to store this error flag away into a store variable or something like that, so you can do your own checking at writes. The other alternative is to call this record again at write time to see what the state is. So you can do that mechanism as well. Okay, so as you can see, it's actually very easy to set up, and it's something that you don't have to think about until after the application's written, which tends to be the case in a lot of applications, that people tend to think of security and stuff afterwards. So this is something that you can plug in at any time. So it's not something that you need to think about to start with necessarily. And then we've got the override screen, which is essentially, you might have a situation where the business is locked up with entity security, but somebody has to process cash receipts for the organization, and that end user needs to be able to see all companies. So for the cash receipt screen, so you can just key in a form name in that particular field, or forms or reports that have that override. So effectively, DesignBais ignores the security model for those particular forms. So on top of that, then the next thing that we have is lockdown mode. And lockdown mode essentially takes the form. In this case, I'll just come out of test mode, and I'll just get this form into run mode. I'll just run it from the menu. So first thing that we do is turn lockdown on. And what that does is, in my style definition, style group definition to start with, I've specified that I want a color in the background if I'm in lockdown mode. So any screen that I go into now will have a very ordinary looking background color. And that's just to alert the end user that you're in lockdown mode. And lockdown mode, the way the application works is a little bit different because there is a special click event, if you like, that gets fired that can affect the way the form runs. So we give people the warning as to they're in lockdown mode at this point. So every form that I run has that horrible background color. So I'll run that particular form again, DB client. So there's the form. If I key in a client, oh, there's already a rule on this. Okay, I'll show you. You can see there that this fruit drop-down is disabled. If I change this postcode to something different, that is no longer disabled. If I change it back to what it was, it is disabled again. And that's because I have a lockdown rule on this particular form. So if I control click into any standard input field or button, if I hit the control and the left mouse button, up will come the lockdown form. And you can see that there are two rules already on this particular form. So the first one applies to developers, people in the development group, and it applies to the field DBC drop-down on the form, and it has some excluded elements in that drop-down. So we'll just have a quick look at that one. So this is using lockdown. I'll just delete this now because because I'm the user that set it up. Actually, I'll delete both rules and we'll start again. So there's no rules on here. Create a new rule. Very first thing to do at the top of the screen is select the field to lock down. So I'll come into, I'm going to need to change that. That's not going to let me change that now. Sorry, let me just get out of that particular state. Right, so I'll just go back into here, create the new rule again. Right, so the very first thing I want to do is select the field to lock down. So I'm going to make it this particular drop-down field. So I'll control click on that, and you can see that that's brought back drop-down test, which is the name of the field, and the application knows it as DBC drop-down. Now I can say that this particular rule applies to users or user groups. So in this case, I'll set it up for a user group, and I'll set it up as developers. And again, everything's got the horrible orange background on it. Now I want the rule to apply. I can say that I want the rule to apply all the time and just disable the field. So if anyone from developers runs this form, the field's disabled. Alternatively, I could say that if a particular field has a particular value, then disable the field. So the rule has the following conditions. Field conditions, click to select, so I click on that. And what that's done is that's taken me back to the form. Now it's asking me what field is it that is going to have the condition based on it. So I'll do a control click here in the postcode field. So you can see now that the rule has the following conditions. Postcode field, DBC P code as it's known by the application. If it's equal to, greater than, less than, I can say 12722. I can also say and or and next field checks the value of the next field as well. So that means if this is true, go and process the next field. Otherwise, the fields are linked by an and or condition. So I'll just leave that as null. So if that case exists, then disable the field. I'll submit this. So now we have a rule on this form. I can close this. Now typically you would need to rerun this. Okay, going up to the top. C12326. I just know that this client has that particular postcode, so you can see that field is now disabled. And as I said, things run a little bit differently whilst you're in lockdown mode. So to test this, you are actually best to have another session that is not in lockdown mode and just run the form normally in that other mode, in the non-lockdown mode. So when I select zip postcode, that's not the one that I've selected, that is now available, and when I delete that, that is now no longer available. So the other thing, I'll just make that available again. So the other thing I'd like to do here, so what typically you could say, if a particular condition exists on the form, stop somebody from hitting the submit button. We have situations where some of our clients have that have particular credit control flags and override flags and stuff like that, and they only want certain people within the organization to be able to control that. So they either use lockdown to do that, or they talk to the developers and get screens changed and business rules put in place. So this is a very simple way of putting some business rules against a particular field or field set, and then have other fields on that form being affected by those rules. So I've got the one rule set that's on the form now, so I'm going to click here to create a new rule for this form. So again, it's saying select the field to lockdown, so the very first thing I do is click that, and that takes me back to the form. So I'll click this drop down. So again, we've got a rule on the drop down that's on this form, and again I want it to apply to developers because I'm in the developers group. I'll accept that. I don't care about field conditions in this case. I just don't want anybody in our organization to have anything to do with mangoes, so I can exclude that from the list, because these are the codes that that particular field has as available in the drop-down list. So what I can say now is exclude that from the list. Now this can be very useful if you have menu structures that are driven by drop-downs, as lots of our clients do. They might have, you key in a client code, and then they'll have an actions drop-down that basically says, what do you want to do with that client? Do you want to create a new order, or do you want to do an invoice inquiry, or do you want to do a client maintenance and all that sort of stuff? You might have a situation where certain people in the organization can only do certain tasks, so you can just go into here and exclude the tasks that a particular group of users or an individual user has access to if the actions are in a drop-down list. Or alternatively, as my example, I just don't want anyone in our organization to deal with anything to do with mangoes. So I'll submit that. So now I have two rules that are on this screen. If I close that now, you will see there that mangoes is gone. So that's really a very quick overview of the security system. It is very, very easy to set up and maintain. If there's any questions at all or anything else that you'd like to know, just I'll stay on for another couple of minutes and answer any questions. If not, that's great. As I said, it's a very simple process. It doesn't look like there are any questions at all, which is very unusual. If you think of a question afterwards, email support@designbais.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with the response. And this program, DBI.I.webinar 2701, is in the on the website in the test drive section. This is probably expired now. I know there it is. And code samples. You'll see there that that's the DesignBais Security program. If you wanted to see anything, how those examples were generated, they're the programs to do that. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to you on the next webinar. Thank you.